Good day, everyone. Today we will be looking at Experiential Learning Lesson 17, which is the Evaluative and Analytical Reports. Just a quick recap from last week's lesson. We discussed informative reports, the similarities and discrepancies of the Coca-Cola report in comparison to the theory covered, and we discussed your brief for your formative assessment 2. Just a few reminders. Please ensure that you attend your weekly sessions with your lecturers just for questions and obviously to follow through with theory and activities that we put out for you. Then please ensure that you start with your next assignment as soon as possible, and then update your assignments as the theory is covered in the class to avoid last-minute obstacles. So obviously with your assignment, we've discussed the brief with you, and some of you made it clear that you are unaware of how you would go about completing this assignment. So as we go through the theory, I would highly suggest that once a week you update your assignment to ensure that you are able to submit on time and to avoid any last minute issues. Okay, so for today, we'll be looking at the objectives for lesson 17, which is understand the structure and content of an evaluative report, understand the role and importance of an evaluative report in the workplace, understand the role and importance of research in an evaluative report, understand the role and importance of planning an evaluative report, and then understanding the role and importance of written skills in an evaluative report. I'd like to emphasize written skills, this with regards to how it is laid out, grammar, spelling, and academic writing in general. This is very important for reports like this and just in general with any assignment submissions. So please ensure that you make put special care into having an academically written report. So for today, it was asked that you looked at fit as a fiddle, and what differences did you notice between the informative report discussed last week and the fit as a fiddle report? So once you've completed that discussion, we'll move on to the next slide, which is evaluative and analytical reports. Much of the format and contents is similar to that of an informative report. In the fit as a fiddle report, you may have noticed that it consists of a cover page, table of contents, an introduction, an overview of the community/issue discussed, the findings, and discussion/recommendations. Okay, so as you can see, it is quite similar to informative report, except for the fact that it has recommendations. Informative reports are purely factual and research orientated, whereas when we look at evaluative and analytical reports, we will give recommendations on the issue. So, looking at the important difference between an informative report and an evaluative/analytical report is the time in which you have to complete it, and also the time layout of it. So, the information collected for this report will serve to assist the author in making educated recommendations and an informed conclusion to whomever has requested the report. So again, that is one of the also big differences between informative reports and evaluative and analytical reports, is that for evaluative and analytical reports, you will give recommendations on the issue. Okay. And then the quality and accuracy are of vital importance for companies. Obviously, you need to ensure that your report is extremely accurate, so to avoid any decisions being made without all the information. And then an evaluation report details how you examined and assessed the subject matter and concluded as a possible solution to the situation. Okay, so again, as with regards to the recommendation, you'll then need to discuss how you've collected your information, what relevance it has to the issue, look at possible case studies that are similar to your issue, refer back to them, and then give an educated recommendation and a very educated conclusion. Then this report shows your research and investigation results. So of course you yourself can either go into the investigation or you can research obviously via internet. And then the purpose is to inform your readers and guide them in making an informed decision. Okay, so that's exactly it. For example, if a manager is requesting a report on performance, and they are requesting an evaluative and analytic report, then you will obviously investigate the situation, you will do your research, and you will then give a conclusion. Let's say, for example, your conclusion shows that performance is lacking due to training. That is part of your observations. In your recommendations, you will then recommend further training on specific areas for each employee to up their performance. Okay, looking at planning and evaluative and analytical reports. Planning is extremely important and will also be included in your assignment. At the end, you will need to put an annexure with your planning. So, as this report will include recommendations/action plan, comprehensive and detailed research is vital to ensure that all aspects of the topic have been covered. Okay, so obviously you want to ensure that you've researched the issue very well and you've used only relevant information. Try not to steer off course from your objectives and goals. It will then create unnecessary reading, and it does not necessarily show that you've done your research, but that you have veered off the path. Then the planning stage will assist you in seeing the areas your report will need to cover. So obviously, if you are doing a report on performance, for example, you won't necessarily look at the amount of water that is consumed from the water cooler. It's obviously quite a silly example, but you can see how sometimes these things can expand and get off path with your objectives and goals. So, for plan of an evaluative or analytical report, I'd highly suggest you go and look at page 311 of your textbook and example 8b. This is very important and will assist you greatly. So, aspects you need to consider in your planning. So, it is the person or persons who are addressed. Determine your target audience. This is vitally important in anything that you do with regards to other people viewing, reading, or taking any information or assignment that you have put out. And then who will read this report and who has requested it. So obviously that will then dictate also again your target audience and how you will orientate this discussion. So let's say, for example, if we look at tampon campaigns and adverts, their target audience are obviously women who are premenopausal. So women under a certain age or, so they will then look at their target audience and they will then tailor their reports, their evaluations, their marketing, all of that around their target audience. And you need to come with the same mindset in that you are almost selling it to the person who has requested it and the people who will be reading it. So you need to orientate the way that you present your information and the way that and what it is that you'll be researching, the manner in which you'll go about it. You need to orientate all of that around your target audience. So over here we have the tampon adverts companies need to direct their efforts towards women who are premenopausal. It would not be wise to target male audience for obvious reasons. Okay. So then we're moving on with more theory. We will be looking at the title. So the title needs to be a workable title and you may need to work it through the progress of your report. So obviously as things develop, as you get more information and you learn more on the topic, your title will then begin to change. So it will no longer just be, for example, performance review or performance research. It will then become John Hopkins Company performance review of marketing sector, etc., etc. Okay, the title will give your research and writing report direction. Okay, so this is also where you'll look at maybe, is it feasible? The word feasible, if that is ever in a title, that is a key word that you will then look at. Feasible meaning, is it affordable? Are we able to do it? And that is then what you'll research. You'll look at the affordability of it. You will look at if you're able to do it, etc., etc. Will your resources allow it? Which you need to obtain resources in order for this to be feasible. Okay. Then looking at procedure or methodology. How will you gather your information? Okay, so generally there's two types of methodologies. So there is qualitative, which is quality, and then quantitative, which is quantity. So qualitative is usually more with regards to interviewing, observations, etc. So a smaller sample size of people, And then your quantitative will go into your surveys and your mass research of stats and things like that. Okay, so obviously if you just feel a little bit lost with your methodology, look into your qualitative and quantitative research theory methodologies, and it will give you a little bit more guidance of how it is that you can go about it. As it is an evaluation, you will need to gather information that is on both ends of the issue. Meaning that if you are looking at increasing training for your marketing sector, because your performance reviews show you're assuming that they're underperforming, you will then need to look at, is it training that we need to implement, or is there anything else? So basically, you'll need to research things that you agree with, that you would recommend, and also the other end of it. Ensure not to make it personal or anything like that. To push an agenda, obviously you need to give the best and most well-informed recommendations. Okay, so how will you gather your information? Again, you can look at reading. So this is your mass searching on sites such as Google Scholar, your university library, etc. Interviewing, you can interview participants in order to get a more in-depth understanding. Surveys can be done obviously over the internet, or you can do them in person. That will then have more participants. You can get that out to people a lot faster. If it's a one-page survey that's got 10 quick questions, multiple questions, agree or disagrees, things like that, that's a good way of getting a large amount of information on a targeted audience, and it will also then be more specific to the people that you are targeting, because obviously doing research and things like that, you can find similar cases, but it will never necessarily be exactly that. If you're focusing on your marketing sector within your company, there's likely not going to be any of them who have participated in research like this under your company within that sector. Okay. And then obviously observations. This is where you won't necessarily interact, but you can observe from a distance. You'll make notes. You can observe people's, maybe their performance. Maybe you see their performance is greatly impacted by the fact that they do not have enough stationery, or to obtain the stationery takes 10 minutes because it is in a locked closet, etc., etc. And that will then greatly impact on their performance. So you can then observe that kind of behavior. And then please keep in mind, record must be kept of all information gathered. So obviously for you guys, this will just be on your proposal, and the information gathered will then need to be kept in the workplace. If ever research is conducted, it's obviously just for interest's sake, you are required to keep that information for a minimum of 5 years, so that if ever your research is published or audited or anything like that, that you can then go back and show how you collected everything and how you were ethical. That's also something very important that I think students need to keep in mind, is that any proposals, reports, and things like that need to be done with ethics in mind. Obviously, you aren't able to go and survey children under the age of 18 without parental consent, etc. So always keep that in mind. It is very important. Okay, then we'll move on to the findings area. So plan the sections that your findings will be located in. Okay, so that's very simple. Basically, it is the structure of your findings area. Make sure that you make use of headings and subheadings, etc., just to make it easier for the reader to navigate through it and make it an easier read. This will highly impact the enjoyment of your assignments for the reader, obviously. And obviously, you want things to be laid out logically. Okay, then we will look at your conclusions. Conclusions are directly linked to your findings and will assist in your recommendations. Okay, so again, your conclusions need to be accurate. That's why your findings and your research all need to be accurate. Because you can then come to a conclusion. Let's stick with the marketing sector in the company with their performance. If you come to the conclusion that actually their performance is not that greatly impacted by the stationery being in a locked closet, it is actually training issues. They don't really know how to navigate the software, for example, that they were working with. So that will then go, you'll then make a conclusion of it and say in conclusion, what I would suggest is when you do a conclusion, always include the words "and in conclusion." Okay, it is a statement piece. It catches the reader, and it also makes very clear what it is that you are concluding on. With majority of these things and with any assignments, please ensure that you blatantly state, this is what I am talking about. Okay. Obviously, because if you don't necessarily give in conclusion, it can sometimes appear that you are unsure of what your conclusion will be, because you will obviously discuss the things that you have found that are in your favor, and you also need to discuss the things that you found that were not in your favor. Okay. Then we will move on to your recommendations. You may break your recommendations down into sections, exactly as you would with your findings. You'll do the same with your recommendations. So you can do your overall recommendations. So let's say you want to increase training within that sector, and because of purely based on the time that it takes to get stationery, maybe there can be a spare key with the marketing manager who can then access the closet for you in under 10 minutes, thus cutting time. Okay, then obviously the limitations and restrictions to your training. This will then be such as things like they will need to have to take time off work to do this training, because obviously it is implemented by the workplace, so they cannot be expected to put in leave for this training, etc., etc. It will cost the company money, things like that. And then actions that are needing to be implemented. Okay, so that is then obviously, again, you'll discuss your training, you'll discuss the fact that they will need a space for the training, you will need to outsource someone or insource someone, however it is that you choose to go about it. And then signage and warnings. Okay, so this is obviously then just with regards to if you choose to do something physical. So for example, if you decide that there needs to be a spare key for the cupboard with the stationery in it, you'll need to put a sign on there that says, in order to get access to this closet, you need to go see John, who's the head of marketing, or you can go see Jane, who's the head of HR. Little things like that. So this is not necessarily, you don't need to put warnings in for your recommendations. Any shortcomings and things like that are included in your limitations and restrictions. Right. And then looking at the overall structure of it. So the structure, plan the structure of your report to collate with your findings and conclusions and recommendations. All right. So obviously, again, you do have a skeleton outline that is recommended, and we do want you to ensure that it all makes sense together. Excuse me. Then planning may be included as an attachment in an appendix in your report. Okay, so again, I just refer to them as annexures. This will need to be included at the end of your report, specifically for your assignment, and obviously if you're doing an evaluative and analytical report. Okay, researching an evaluative and analytical report. Your research will directly influence your conclusions and recommendations, as we have stipulated multiple times. And then important aspects of your research, such as legality. Are there any legal requirements or consequences? What standards have been noted in other cases similar to yours? Okay, so this is why case studies are so important. You need to ensure that whatever it is that you recommend, the way you go about your research, etc., is all legally sound. So again, for example, let's say you say that all the marketing employees need to go for training. This is then coming from the work side. Technically, you cannot ask them to put in leave because it is a requirement from the work for them to do this training, and it is not a personal time. So little things like that that you will need to ensure that you cover in your recommendations and things like that. So again, this will make up a large portion of your research, thus directly influencing your proposal, conclusion, and recommendations in the situation. Okay, so again, you'll discuss similar case studies. You can also discuss some case studies where, let's say, for example, employees landed up putting in leave. They landed up going against it. Although someone has done it, does not mean that it is legally sound. So you can then discuss that case study and then say, but this was not legal, etc., etc. So we will not be requiring that they put in leave. Okay, then your opinion needs to be accurate and reliable. And this is done by ensuring your research is referenced and well researched. Referencing is vitally, vitally important here. If you fail to use direct quotation marks, you will be penalized for plagiarizing. Even if it's an honest mistake, unfortunately, it is a failure on the researcher's end to conduct their research and present it accurately and in a presentable way. And then obviously well researched to ensure that you cover all bases. But with regards to referencing, please ensure if there's any information that you are giving that you yourself had to read up, or if you retrieved it from anywhere, please ensure that you reference it. And then if you are direct quoting, ensure that you reference it and use the quotation marks. These are quotation marks. Okay, so one at the beginning and one at the end. Okay, and if you start a reference in the middle of a sentence, you need to put ellipses beforehand. Okay. All right. Then moving on to basic research skills that apply. So A is research objectives and goals must be clear. This will guide your research and the information you gather. Okay, so that is quite self-explanatory. Then B is make accurate copies of information and store them. Okay, ensure that if you have a hard copy of something, that you always have a soft copy of it. If you have a soft copy of something, you make sure that you have a hard copy of it. Ensure that you keep it safe on your computer, on a backup, on a flash. Send it to a friend. Not really, but you know what I mean. Save it onto your Google Drive so that it is off of your device, safe somewhere, so that if something does happen, like me who spills water on her laptop, then at least you are able to retrieve it. Okay. This is done by having a digital or physical secure place to store your data, arrange your information in a logical manner, creating, recording statistical data, and presenting information in the appropriate manner. Okay, so this is again with regards to storage and just how you will present it. Okay, and then C, understanding the information. This is achieved through research and consulting with experts on that matter. So through your research, you also need to understand what it is that you're discussing to an extent. What I would always suggest is that if you ever present a proposal or paper or a project, you need to be able to have a full-blown discussion about it too. All right. Then writing an evaluative analytical report. Okay, looking at your content, your heading of the report is your heading / title of the report is important, complex, that is informed, is just as important and complex as the informed report. The title must include objectives, goals, and the nature of the report. Okay, so again, so let's say you're talking about informative reports. Your informative report may be something simple such as marketing sector performance. Your evaluative and analytical reports title will be more based on what your objectives are, okay, and how it is that you'll go about the research and things like that. So you can then say a qualitative approach on the marketing sector's productivity, etc., etc. So you'll then bring in your objectives and the way in which you've gone about the report. Okay, so on the cover page must be your company's name, title, and subtitle of the report, the author's name, and date the report was submitted. Okay, the table of contents is obviously located on the first page, and your executive summary may be placed before or after the table depending on how you would like to do it. I personally prefer it before the content table so that once you read a report, you can see if you're actually interested or not, or if you go, well, you know, I really want to skip down to that conclusion. It seems quite interesting. You scroll to the next page, and there you go. There's the page which the conclusion or the recommendations, etc. is on. Okay, and then please note your executive summary is literally the last thing that you will do on your assignment because it includes information from your conclusion. So here we look at the executive summary, overview of important information to be completed last, and a summary of reports, conclusion, and recommendations. Okay, so you can see why it has to be done last. Obviously, you can type out quite a draft of it and edit it and etc. as you go about, but it will be the last thing of your assignment that is actually fully completed. Okay, then introduction of terms of reference. Okay, this details the purpose of the study, what will be evaluated and why, and each section must be outlined. Okay, so we like to refer to this, each section must be outlined as a roadmap of the introduction. Basically, you'll introduce it, you'll discuss your topic a little bit, and then you'll say, in this report, we will be discussing A, B, C, D, E, F, and you will basically list out each topic or title that is in your report. So again, introduction, you can draft it before, but it'll also be one of the things that you finalize dead last, because it will also again include all the titles and things, and you could get halfway and decide, oh well, I want to add something else, and then it's not in your conclusion. So ensure that once you've completed your executive summary, you take a relook at your conclusion to ensure that you have everything. Okay. Introduction or terms of reference should consist of who requests the report and why, detail the objective, describe the issue that is to be analyzed and evaluated in detail, clarify methodology and strategies used to obtain the information, explain the scope of the report, how the issue was evaluated, and time periods of the evaluation. Okay, so quite self-explanatory, nice little breakdown there that needs to be included in your introduction. Then looking at methodologies and procedures. This needs to be laid out in a clear and cohesive manner. Obviously, please ensure that you again make use of headings and subheadings. The section explains the entire research process. Evidence of your research and information obtained must be described in detail, great detail. All steps must be described in detail again. And then information about tool and resources must be clarified. Okay, so that's obviously what resources you used or you have. Let's say you are looking at the marketing place and you all have laptops, so you're all able to do online training, etc., things like that. Okay, findings and results, forms the basis of your recommendation, and then it gives context and confirms why your recommendations are as such. So if someone skips down to your recommendations and says, well, why do they need training, they can then come directly to your findings or results, and they can then see why it is. And then this is data, statistic, and supporting opinions will be tabulated and presented in a logical manner. Okay, so obviously with stats and things like that, you can do graphs, you can do tables, you can also just discuss it. Ideally, we prefer it if things are discussed. If you give a table with it, that is also great. It is just because you must never assume that your reader understands statistical information and things like that, can interpret it correctly. You need to interpret it for them. Okay. Then moving on to your conclusions, the result of the interpretation analysis done of your information gathered, and then these will direct your recommendations. Then your recommendations must be in line with findings and your conclusions. Okay, obviously if your findings indicate that they need more training, but then you decide to conclude that they need more coffee, it will not obviously correlate with one another. Okay, and then your appendices and annexures. These are all extra data, calculations, interviews, etc. With your interviews, they need to be transcribed, every single one of them, and are to be included. The report must be signed by the author and their name printed below with a signature. This is basically just a sign off to say, you are aware of everything that's been included. Okay, moving on to structure again. There's no fixed structure. This is obviously just a skeleton structure. So what I would say is ensure that you have every single step in here. You can add, but I would never recommend that you take anything out, because this is the skeleton of the essay, of the report, etc. Okay, so you want to obviously add more beef to it, etc. So it will be your cover page, your introduction, your methodologies and strategies. Please note that your cover page will also be complemented by your table of contents and your executive summary, methodologies and strategies, findings and results, conclusions, recommendations, annexures, and your sign-off as clear. So, in a class activity, you can turn to page 320 to do activity 8D. Okay, once that activity is done, this is the end of the lesson. For the next lesson teaser, we'll be introduced to excuse the interruption. For the next lesson teaser, we'll be introduced to contemporary leadership and motivation abilities and ideas, become aware of their own views and perceptions of leadership styles and motivational techniques and abilities, become aware of others' views and perceptions of leadership styles and motivational techniques and abilities, become integrated and curious about the development of leadership skills and the ability to motivate others to perform at their best in a diverse workplace. For the next lesson, you will need to prepare chapter 3, pages 98 to 101. And there's also a podcast link that you must please listen to. Thank you very much.